Hello and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. Here's an example. Last time, talked about the benefit of ladybugs controlling aphids in the garden in this lovely book by Barry Watts. And that reminded me of this book. An Inordinate Fondness for Beetles. It's by Arthur Evans and Charles Bellamy, and Lisa Watson did the photographs. This is quite a book. The title's unusual, An Inordinate Fondness for Beetles. And right away in the prologue, that's explained. Asked what could be inferred about the work of the Creator from a study of his works, the British scientist J.B.S. Haldane is reported to have replied, an inordinate fondness of beetles. Some people say that Haldane never uttered these words, but no one can argue the truth they contain. We live in the age of beetles. By the most conservative estimate, approximately 350,000 species of beetles. 350,000 species of beetles have been described since 1758. Most species are restricted to a particular continent, mountain range, valley, or soil type. Well, here's an example of the kind of photographs that you'll see in here, and whole pages with a multitude of different beetles. Well, mind-boggling. I think what I want to talk about in this video is the diversity of life on this planet and variety. Now, we talked about it a little bit when we were looking at some of the pictures about vegetables in some of the books, different kinds of corn, different kinds of tomatoes, potatoes, squash. And that reminds me of this book, because, well, the talk about the vegetables. More Tales of Oliver Pig by Jan van Leeuwen. Pictures by Arnold Lobel. That title implies that there's a Tales of Oliver Pig as well. Now, Oliver goes out in the spring to work with his father, and every day Father and Oliver worked in the garden. Oliver made shade for his plant. They'd planted seeds, and he'd found a seed, and he planted that. And finally his plant comes up. He'd expected it to be there, of course, the next morning, but it wasn't. And so Father said, it'll be a surprise. So when the sun was too hot, he watered it. When the rain did not fall, soon it had flowers. And one day, a baby squash. Now can I eat it? Asked Oliver. Not quite yet, said Father. We must wait for the squash to grow bigger. So, one of 5 stories in this book. Now, she also wrote the Tales of Amanda Pig, and a second book there. Amanda Pig on Her Own, and Oliver, Amanda, and Grandmother Pig. they're like first readers, easy to read, dial, easy to read, is what they call them. Yeah, it's been called other things, but you get the picture of what they're like. Now, here's a writer who wrote fiction, most remembered for his fiction. His fiction was a book called The Aeneid, which was the travels and the journeys of Aeneas after the fall of Troy, leaving and making his way to Rome. Here's another version, Ralph Humphreys, this one by Robert Fitzgerald. But he had other interests. He died more than 2,000 years ago. And one of his interests was gardening. And he wrote a book called The Georgics. And this is a translation by David Ferry. It's a neat book in that he really gives some sound advice. And it's neat the way it's laid out. The left-hand page is the Latin, and the right-hand page is the translation. I spend most of my time on the right-hand page. I wanted to share something in there about oaks and fire later on when we're back to trees again. But vetch, kidney beans, Egyptian lentils, both as it sets will send no signs. You may plant them then or any time before the winter frosts. He's telling when certain plants should be planted, information on tools, information on supplying water if you don't have much of a water supply to your plants. I mean, in Italy it would get hot in the summer, and ways that you can divert a stream and bring it to help. All kinds of helpful information, and as I say, we'll get back to him at another point. Bill Neal must have followed that thread of interest and said, it would be nice to have a book of Latin, sort of a dictionary, so that if you're looking at the Latin name of something, you can decode what it says. So he makes a dictionary, starting with the A's and so forth, right on through. And this book's set up on the page interestingly too. For example, this is the dictionary part, and on the edges there might be old legends or myths or interesting facts. So there's a lot to take in on the pages. I noticed when I was looking through that here's flora. So if the word flora appears, it's used in honor of Flora, Roman goddess of flowering plants. Now, the Romans had a variety, a diversity of gods for all kinds of things. Here's Phlos Jovis, Jove's flower. I noticed Layne is in here, and so it's an interesting book, and depending on how far your interest is in the botany and working at gardens and things like that, might be helpful. One of the other things we discussed were plants which had been given the history of them, how they got their name, and that was by Peter Limburg. And I remembered, I said, didn't he write a book on poison ivy? So I looked around and I found the book. And his, it's got photographs, drawings, where does poison ivy grow? Actually, probably if I looked at the table of nice, good drawing of, to show 3 leaves, 3 leaves, 3 leaves. And those leaves can be sort of smooth-edged. They can also be jaggedy. So it's hard to know for sure. And of course there's berries as well. But it's got a neat symptoms of ivy poisoning, what to do for it, how to care for it if you should get exposed to poison ivy. The most important thing is how to recognize poison ivy, and then equally important, what happens if you do. We spent a little time just talking about, and I think it's important to know stinging nettle, not poisonous, but quite poisonous, the seeds of laburnum, quite poisonous, the berries of the yew, and so being able to, I had a close friend not too long ago was cleaning out around his place, and not here, elsewhere, and got poison ivy. Not a fun experience. This book is Diet for a Small Planet. It's really almost all menus, almost the whole contents is crusty soybean casserole, cream curry casserole. This must be in things about casseroles. So vegetarian enchiladas, easy Mexican pan bread, curried soybeans and peanuts. So what else is in this book besides these sort of vegetarian recipes? Well, the first part has got a few reasons why Francis Moore Lapp is writing the book. So if you come across one of these books and are curious at all, pages 16, 17, and 18, pages 16, 17, and 18 are quite, land that grows money can't grow food is one of the sections. Mining the soil. But let's go back to this land that grows money can't grow food. She's talking about cash crops. And she says there's a lot of crops, land was cleared that could be planted to nourish people, food, but ends up being cash crops like tobacco was, rubber, tea, coffee, cotton, and other fibers. And they don't have any nutritional value. And then she talks about a few other things that I say on those few pages that I'd never thought about. I didn't read this till I was in my late 20s, and when I read it then I thought, jeepers, she's making some good common sense. But that was just my opinion, and it still is my opinion. But anyway, don't hold it against me. Ted Lewin, Market. Now, these are just striking, bold watercolors. And I made a little note of the places that he goes to in this. Ecuador, Nepal, Ireland, Uganda, Fulton Fish Market in New York City, and Morocco. unusual places and unusual foods and spices and whatever. So this is one could say is an introduction to that for maybe 10-year-olds and up. But this is for 10-year-olds as well, even though the text is a little more. Here's it's done by Nellie Schaefer and Mimi Sheraton, and it's called The Food Markets of the World, and talk about diversity. Holy moly. So here's what happens. I took this down as a note to share with you. I thought might be of interest. 175 photos, 40 pages on Asia, 34 pages on Europe, 28 pages on Latin America, the Middle East and Northern Africa, 26 pages, the U.S., 22 pages, no Canada. But Canada's markets might be somewhat similar, though there's certainly where there's communities with a more diverse population, you will find, I mean, in Victoria or Vancouver, you'll find restaurants serving food from dishes using ingredients and spices from all over the world. So if you live in a place like that, it's, well, another good point about, you know, traveling. Sometimes you don't have to travel to these countries if you live in a place where these kinds of restaurants exist. Well, thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.